His uniform was immaculate. Not a single thread was out of place. The silver stars on his collar gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the forward operating base, and his reputation preceded him like a cold front. He was a major general, a man who had spent 30 years climbing the ladder of strict military hierarchy, and he had very specific, very rigid definitions of merit, courage, and credibility. In his world, heroes came in a specific mold. They were loud, they were brash, they were the quintessential image of the all-American soldier, the type who could rally the troops with a single bellowed command. He did not have time for whisperers, for complainers, or for men who spent more time filling out incident reports than they did actually fighting. Captain Elias Vance did not fit the general's mold. Elias was quiet. He was the kind of officer who read maps by red lens flashlight while everyone else slept, who knew the names of every single soldier in his company, not just their service numbers. He was a Mustang, an enlisted man who had clawed his way to a commission, and he carried the weight of his rank like a debt he was constantly trying to pay off. But he had one fatal flaw in the eyes of the high command. He refused to shut up about the truth. For months, Vance had been a splinter under the fingernail of the brigade staff. While other captains simply accepted their orders and moved out, Vance questioned. He filed formal complaints about the intelligence provided for their sector, citing satellite imagery that contradicted the briefings. He argued vociferously that the rules of engagement were tying his men's hands behind their backs, or forcing them to hesitate in the split-second window between identifying a threat and neutralizing it. He pointed out, with cold, precise logic, that the command post was operating on a 4-hour delay, trying to fight a counterinsurgency battle using tactics from a conventional war that had ended 40 years prior. "Captain Vance," the colonel had said during one particularly tense briefing, his face reddening, "are you calling my staff incompetent?" "No, sir," Vance had replied, his voice steady, his eyes locked forward. "I am calling the system they are forced to operate in dysfunctional. There is a difference." That was the moment his fate was sealed. The general, who had been observing from the back of the TOC, did not say a word. He simply watched. He watched the way the junior officers looked at Vance, not with annoyance, but with hope. He watched the way the NCOs nodded subtly in agreement, and he made a silent decision. Vance was dangerous, not to the enemy. Vance was lethal to the enemy, but to the chain of command. You couldn't have a captain questioning the very foundation of the operational strategy. It was bad for morale. It was bad for discipline. And so the machine began its quiet, bureaucratic work of burying him. The first sign of trouble was invisible to the untrained eye. Vance's award citations, previously a steady stream of Bronze Stars and Army Commendation Medals for his work during his first tour, suddenly stopped. His OER, the Officer Evaluation Report that determines the trajectory of a military career, came back with glowing adjectives in the performance section, but damning faint praise in the promotion potential block. It was the equivalent of being voted most likely to succeed, but being told you'd never get the corner office. His battalion commander, a man who respected Vance immensely, called him in. "Elias," he said, closing the door, "I don't know what you did, but the air up there has turned to ice. I recommended you for the staff position at division. It got kicked back within 24 hours. No explanation. Just return without action." Vance simply nodded. He had expected it. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. He had read that quote in a book about Japanese philosophy, and it perfectly encapsulated the current state of his career. But he wasn't going to stop being the nail. He couldn't. Because out there, in the Badlands of the Eastern Province, the intelligence was getting worse. The IEDs were getting more sophisticated. And the Viper was waiting. They called him the Viper. It wasn't an official designation. It was the name whispered by terrified villagers and intercepted by the human intelligence teams. He was not a uniformed soldier, not a Taliban commander in the traditional sense. He was a ghost, a facilitator, a master trainer who moved between Haqqani networks and ISIS-K splinter cells with impunity. His real name was unknown, but his signature was unmistakable. Wherever the Viper went, the enemy's tactics changed overnight. They stopped spraying AK fire wildly into the wire and started using precision, aimed shots. They stopped triggering IEDs with crude pressure plates and started using sophisticated daisy-chain command wires that could be initiated from 300 meters away. The general, sitting in his air-conditioned palace, you saw the Viper as a statistic, an HVT, a high-value target, to be tracked on a PowerPoint slide with a red circle around it. The intelligence analyst would brief that the Viper was assessed to be operating in the Kapisa Valley, and the general would nod, order a routine patrol, and move on to the next agenda item. He had no feel for the terrain, no instinct for the hunt. He was managing a war, not fighting one. For Vance, the Viper was an obsession. He studied the pattern of attacks the way an art historian studies brush strokes. He noticed the details that the analysts missed, the fact that the Viper never used the same safe house twice, the fact that he always left a single specific type of Soviet-era 7.62 by 39 millimeter cartridge at the scene of his training sites, almost like a calling card. Then Vance knew that the Viper wasn't just in the Kapisa Valley. He was of the Kapisa Valley. He was a local who had likely fought with the Northern Alliance against the Soviets, switched sides during the Civil War, and emerged as a chameleon-like warlord in the new era. He wasn't just a tactical asset. He was an idea. And you couldn't kill an idea with a Hellfire missile if you didn't know where to aim. The tension came to a head during a routine shura, a meeting with the village elders of a small hamlet called Mirdesh. The general had flown in by Black Hawk, eager to press the flesh and take photos for the press release back home. The elders, old men with wispy beards and ancient eyes, served green tea and spoke in circuitous pleasantries. Vance stood behind the general, his interpreter Hashim at his side. Though Vance noticed something the general did not. The elders were not making eye contact. They were nervous about something specific. They were hiding something under the floorboards of their hospitality. Finally, the oldest man, a patriarch named Haji Gul, spoke. His voice trembled. He spoke of the Americans as guests, which in Pashtunwali, the tribal code, is the highest honor one can bestow. But he also spoke of a great pressure. He spoke of a man, a shaitan, who visited the village at night. He would not say the name. He did not need to. He is like the snake, Haji Gul said through Hashim, his eyes fixed on the dust. He sleeps in the rocks. You do not see him until he is at your heel. The general smiled patiently. He thanked the elder for his time, reassured him that the Afghan National Army would provide security, and stood up to leave. He had done his job. He had shown the flag. Vance did not stand. "Sir," he said, his voice low, "ask him where the rocks are." The general paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Captain, we have satellite coverage of the entire valley. We don't need to scare the locals with interrogation tactics." "It's not interrogation," Vance said. "It's listening." The general hesitated, acutely aware that the cameras were off, and the only witnesses were his own men and a handful of suspicious Afghans. He gave a curt nod, granting Vance 60 seconds. Vance knelt, bringing himself to the eye level of the old man. He spoke softly through Hashim. He didn't ask for military intelligence. He asked about the village. He asked about the grape harvest. He asked about the health of Haji Gul's grandson, in who he had noticed was limping. He talked for 10 minutes, not 60 seconds. The general shifted his weight impatiently. Then, Haji Gul looked directly at Vance. It was the first direct eye contact he had made with any American. He moved his hand slowly, as if brushing a crumb from the table, but his index finger extended, pointing not to a map coordinate, not to a specific building, but to a direction. Northwest, to the ridgeline overlooking the village. to the mouth of a cave that was invisible from the air, hidden under an overhang of granite that deflected radar and infrared. "He is there," Haji Gul whispered. "He sleeps today. He thinks the big general makes too much noise. He does not fear the noise. He fears the quiet hunter." Vance thanked him. He did not look at the general. He did not ask for permission, but he simply keyed his radio and spoke to his platoon leaders in the clipped, calm tones of a man who has just drawn a full house. The general was apoplectic. "Captain Vance, you are acting on the word of a single unreliable source. We do not have assets cleared for an assault on that ridgeline. We need to call in ISR. We need a 24-hour pattern of life analysis. We need approval from the Joint Operations Center." But Vance was already moving. His men were already moving. They had been waiting for this moment for months. They trusted their captain. They knew he wasn't sending them into a killing zone based on a hunch. They knew he had memorized every inch of that terrain, that he had rehearsed the breach of that cave in the dirt with pebbles and sticks 100 times. The assault was surgical. So 2 squads provided base of fire from the village compound. One squad, led by Vance himself, took the goat path up the reverse slope, moving with the silence of professional hunters. They found the cave entrance, not guarded by armed men, but by a sophisticated early warning system, tripwires connected to tin cans filled with pebbles. Vance disarmed them with the patience of a bomb technician. Inside the cave, the Viper was not sleeping. He was sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, a cup of tea cooling beside him, a battered Soviet-era Tokarev pistol lying in his lap. He was an old man, his face deeply lined, one eye clouded with a cataract. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a grandfather. But when he saw Vance crouched in the entrance, the muzzle of his M4 trained on his chest, the Viper did not reach for his weapon, and he smiled. It was not a smile of surrender. It was a smile of recognition. "You are the one who asks questions," the Viper said in perfect, unaccented English. "The others, they talk at me. You are the one who listens." Vance kept his rifle trained. "Tell your men to stand down." "I have no men," the Viper said, gesturing at the empty cave. "Only me. I sent them away. I knew the old man would talk. I knew you would come." He paused, tilting his head. "I wanted you to come. I wanted to see the face of the man who fights for a general who despises him." It was a psychological operation delivered with surgical precision. The Viper knew. He had informants inside the base, or perhaps he was simply a brilliant student of human nature. He knew about the OER, about the frozen promotion, about the quiet disdain of the high command. But he was trying to plant a seed of mutiny, of doubt. Vance did not bite. "You're coming with us. You have the right to remain silent." The Viper laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Silence? Captain, I have been silent for 40 years. It is your people who cannot stop talking. Your generals talk on television. Your politicians talk on the internet. Your satellites scream your position to the entire world. You have no shadows left to hide in." He looked past Vance, towards the mouth of the cave, towards the valley below where the general was undoubtedly screaming into a radio. "He thinks I am a terrorist. I am not a terrorist. I am a patriot. I fought the Russians when your country sold them wheat. I fought the Northern Alliance when your country armed them. Now I fight you. It is not ideology. It is simply the season. I am the Viper. The Viper does not change his nature. He only changes his prey." At that moment, the radio on Vance's chest crackled. It was the battalion commander, his voice strained. "Vance, the general is ordering you to pull back. He is launching a JDAM from the B-1 holding overhead. You have 2 minutes to clear the blast radius. Acknowledge." The Viper heard it. He didn't flinch. "You see?" he said softly. "He does not want the evidence. He does not want me in a courtroom, talking about the money, the weapons, the corruption. He wants a crater. He wants a statistic. He wants to go home." Vance looked at the Viper.